Welcome to The Source, where we combine the headlines with in-depth conversations with the newsmakers themselves. Today on the program, the president makes good on his promise to close down Boracay.
For going to Singapore, pinirma na niya. Okay pa rin siya, in time pa rin.
But he also revealed another plan.
If you really want to know ang sa puso ko, I would give it to the farmers. Kasi agriculture yan eh.
Some residents are not too optimistic about the possibility.
Wala na nagpa-farm dito. Kasi nga, mas madaling mag-cater sa tourism eh.
Can the government convert a beach paradise to an agricultural farmland?
If the President so orders that we will immediately implement the land reform program in Boracay, we will do it because there is a valid ground.
Agrarian Reform Secretary John Castriciones joins us live. And later, a smart car window for the visually impaired. That's for today's In Focus. Thank you for joining us. I'm Pinky Webb. The Agrarian Reform Department says the President's order to convert Boracay Island into agricultural farmland can be done. The department is looking at 400 hectares of land in Boracay to be included in the Agrarian Reform Program. Now that the government closed down the island for 6 months to pave the way for its rehabilitation. How soon can the government give away land in Boracay? Let's go straight to the source of the story. Agrarian Reform Secretary John Castriciones. Secretary.
Good morning, Pinky.
Good to finally see you in person.
Thank you.
Sir, you were appointed in DAR, you said December of
Yes.
last year.
That's right.
This has to be one of your major a task sa DAR, sir. So, how many times did you go to Boracay? How did you survey it? What did you see?
Well, 2 weeks ago, I went to Boracay to have a personal survey. And of course, I used a chopper just so to have an overview of Boracay. And this is what I found. There are so many structures there which aren't supposed to be there. In the first place, if we're going to have an overview or let's say a history of Boracay, you would find out that first of all, under President Ferdinand Marcos, it was declared under Presidential Proclamation 1801 that it is a tourist destination. Subsequently thereafter, there was a presidential proclamation under 1064 of President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo that declared that Boracay is actually a government-owned land. And because of that, there was an inventory of the land that was conducted. And it turned out that 400 hectares are actually forest land and 628 hectares are agricultural land which is supposed to be alienable and disposable.
Okay, yun yung mga terms na kailangan po nating intindihin.
Okay.
So sabi niyo po, let's go back to, you said that you took a chopper for an overview and you realized that there are structures, you saw structures that were not supposed to be there.
Right.
How do you know that the structures are not supposed to be there to begin with, sir?
First of all, it's an agricultural land. You know, if you put commercial, industrial, or residential structures there, what would happen is that there must first be a DAR clearance or a conversion order coming from the Department of Agrarian Reform.
Was there any?
Well, that's why. It turns out that there are only 3 applications that were filed in the Department of Agrarian Reform. Upon perusal of the records of the Department of Agrarian Reform, it turned out that there's well, without mentioning the names, of course, there are around 140 hectares that applied for an exemption order. Now, when you say an exemption order, this means that it is barred from being utilized as for purposes of land reform. But the fact is, before you can put commercial, industrial, or residential structures there, you must have to secure a DAR clearance or a conversion order. Now, aside from the 140 hectares, there's another 80 hectares.
So, just to be clear,
Okay.
140, meron humingi ng exemption na 140
Correct,
hectares.
correct.
Okay.
And then, aside from that, there is an 80-hectare application for a conversion order, for a conversion of the said land from agricultural land to commercial, industrial, and residential purposes. And that, in effect, is the only area which is supposed to be valid, where you can put commercial, residential, and industrial
Does that include the
structures.
140 plus 80, sir? Or
Well,
we're just talking about the 80?
That is basically the safe area which we can declare as the place where you can really initiate these so-called structures. But for the 140 hectares, we are going over it despite the fact that there is an exception order. As far as the records would show, there are no direct clearances that would have to convert the agricultural land into something like a commercial or industrial or residential
Let's clear this
area.
up, sir.
Yes, sir.
So there are
Yes, ma'am.
80 hectares
Yes.
that you're saying, basically, sir, legally, pinayagan ng DAR to be converted. Tama
Correct,
ho? Okay.
correct.
There's 140 na patuloy nyo pa rin pinag-aaralan.
That's right.
Okay. And I want to bring this in. First, balikan po natin yung proclamation ni Pangulong Gloria Macapagal Arroyo. Proclamation number 1064. Let's put that up on the screen. So, it says it classifies Boracay as forest land for protection purposes and agricultural land, which is alienable and disposable. What does this proclamation mean? Does this just ang ibig lang ho ba sabihin nito, ang may-ari ng Boracay ay gobyerno?
Yan po. In effect, in essence, in gist, that's what it means. It's a government-owned land, and this was confirmed by a Supreme Court decision.
So, ang
Dar
gobyerno
versus
may-ari
Yap.
nito.
Opo.
So, ngayon, it's the government that owns Boracay. So, paano ho napasok dito yung alienable and disposable? Ano ho ba ang alienable and disposable?
Well, it can be subject for ownership. It can be subject for ownership. But there has to be a process that must be done before it becomes owned
Yours.
privately by private persons. But basically, since there are none as of our records, then apparently what would happen now is that this area can be the subject of an agrarian reform program.
Is this the one we're talking about, 628.96
You're right,
hectares, sir?
Pinky, that's right.
So,
That's
yan yung alienable and disposable. And you're
Correct.
saying that this 628, wala pa pong may-ari niyan, wala pa pong gumawa ng proseso para to own any square meter of that hectares, sir? Hundreds of hectares?
Well, to be honest about it, there are some titles that are being claimed, and I think it is safe to say, because anyway, it's a public record, it's the Tirol estate. Basically, they're claiming that this has been titled prior to the declaration about the government-owned land, that is a government-owned land. And of course, this based on a
Prior to 1064.
That's right. And based on the decision of the Supreme Court, this must be respected. And this cannot be attacked collaterally.
Yeah.
That's right. So because of that, then basically, since there have been no cases being filed or any action at all questioning the validity of the said estate, then basically it remains to be respected.
So, how much, okay, gaano ho ba kalawak ang Boracay Island? Let's look at 1,151, sir.
Yes,
Para
ma'am.
mas madali pag-usapan, 1,1 na lang, sir, 1,100 hectares.
Sure, sure.
Ilan ho ba dito sa 1,100 hectares ay legally owned by a private person or group?
Well, based on the title, no, I'm not really. I don't want to claim that I know the exact figure, right? But there is a title which states, but it's not the whole 628 hectares. That's a fact. So it's just a portion of the 628 hectares.
Na meron pong may-ari talaga, na may
Correct.
titulo na po sila.
Yes, that's why.
And
This subsequently, this title was allegedly subdivided into more titles, which we call the transfer certificate
I
of
see.
title.
Sir, around how much of the 600 disposable and alienable, yun pa rin po pinag-uusapan natin, ay pinagmamay-ari po, is owned by a private group or person? Around how much? Are we looking at 100?
I don't want to state a certain figure because I'm not really privy to the area. But basically, it's less than 600, probably around 1.6 or something like that. It's not the whole 628 hectares.
Yeah, but 1.6 is maliit po yun. Sir.
It's really small.
Lagay na lang natin, baka 80 lang yun, 80 hectares.
Well, I don't want to state figures because I'm not sure about it.
So, all right. So, let's bring that back in. So, ang sinabi po natin, you have Boracay Island, grand total is about 1,151 hectares. And then you said that 60% is alienable and disposable and 40% is forest.
More or less.
Okay. Sir, yung forest land na yan, 377 point, Plain and simple, sir, what does that mean? You cannot put any structure there, even with any exemptions asked from government?
Of course, it's a forest land that must be protected. That is the reason why it's classified as a forest land.
Ngayon, the question, Secretary, is those who possibly have built in the 377 hectares, wala na po silang laban, sigurado pong de-demolish sila.
Well, I'm not saying that it will be demolished. It's a legal issue that must have to be resolved because it would appear that based on records, there is no justification why these structures were built in those areas.
There was no exemption coming from the DAR for the forest land of any structure there, sir?
As far as our records would show, there is none.
And if there is no DAR record, sir,
I think the
is that
conclusion
illegal?
is quite clear.
That, let it come from you, sir.
Yeah, that's right.
The conclusion is that?
It's clear that it's not justified by law that these structures must be built in those areas.
All right, so that's the forest land. I just want to go back quickly to the alienable and disposable. Sir, it's also good to understand na kapag alienable and disposable, dito ba pumapasok yung tax deck? Ganun ho ba yun?
Well, that's the process that most of the people would do, that they would have to apply for a tax declaration, and it would be on the record of the local government unit, of course. But that's not conclusive as to ownership. When you have a tax declaration, doesn't really mean that you are conclusively the owner of the property.
What does a tax deck mean for somebody who's been paying the taxes?
Well, it can probably be deduced from the tax declaration that you are now occupying the property. That's the reason why you're paying for taxes there.
If somebody has been paying tax deck, just hypothetically, sir, for, I don't know, 10 years, does that eventually make the person own?
No, you have to file for the issuance of a title before that can be conclusively declared as yours.
Even if it's been 20 years, 30 years that you've been paying tax debt?
That's what I know. As far as I know, that's the real process.
We'll be taking a short break. This is The Source on CNN Philippines. When we return, what can farmers grow in agricultural land in Boracay? And later, the visually impaired can feel the view with this smart window. The details on today's In Focus. You're watching The Source on CNN Philippines. Our guest today, Agrarian Reform Secretary John Castriciones. Sir, lilinawin ko lang ulit for those watching. Might be a little bit confusing. So yung forest land, hindi dapat talaga magtayo doon ng kahit na ano. So once you declare that nobody is supposed to build any structure there, it's deemed illegal.
Well, that's the conclusion that can be deduced from it.
And what can the DAR do about that? Or that's out of your hands, sir?
Well, as far as DAR is concerned, that's not within our mandate or jurisdiction.
Not?
Yes, not.
Hindi na ho kayo yun?
So ours is just to identify the area which can be the subject of agrarian reform and to identify the farmer beneficiaries who would be given those lands.
Yeah, but it's also your mandate to tell the president, which is alienable and disposable, and which is forest land. And if you say that forest land, you're not supposed to build anything there, then my conclusion is anything that they're
That's
built there.
DNR's function.
DANR na
Yes,
yun. Okay.
yes, right.
At nagkakaroon ka ata ng overlapping. Let's stick to the function of the DAR.
Yes.
Have you identified, I know, sir, during your press conference that you said there are 80 hectares that can immediately be given out to former beneficiaries?
No, that's not what I said.
Sige, sir.
Well,
Let's
actually,
clarify
when we went there and we tried to conduct a survey, an overview of Boracay, it turned out that, as I said, those agricultural lands, there were so many structures built there. And if we are to comply with the order of the president, which we can do, and we will do if we order so, there are just patches of lands which don't have any structures anymore, which can immediately be subjected to agrarian reform program. This would probably be around 15 hectares.
15?
15, 1-5.
Ito yung, sorry sir, 15.5 hectares of agricultural land. So these are the ones you surveyed, again, that did not have any structures on it.
Right.
So, walang problema, walang kaso, walang pwedeng appeal.
Correct.
So, pwede niyong pamigay?
Yes.
Okay, so 15.5 hectares that you can immediately distribute. Who are the beneficiaries and how do you vet them, sir?
You know,
Yan ang job niyo.
it's really, well, it's my first time to know also that there are still IPs who are actually residents of the area. They call themselves the Ati. And I was able to visit a certain village there which has a kadti, which means that it was reserved for them, for these IPs. And they were telling us stories about prior to the coming in of the so-called businessmen who actually occupied the area. It turned out that they were the ones who were really tilling the soil, and they were actively involved in agriculture, like...
We actually had a story on that, sir. CNN did a story on them.
That's right. And aside from that, there are many IPs, they call themselves the Ati, who are actually now residing in the mainland because they were driven out of Boracay. And there are a number of them. In fact, we talked to some of their so-called chieftains who really confirmed and made some... revealing information about the travails of their group. And aside from that, there are also the groups which they call themselves the Unak, meaning they're not the Atis, no? They were farmers, and they were tilling the soil, according to them, prior to the entry of the so-called businessman in Boracay.
So how many beneficiaries do you have so far?
Well, from our count, if my memory serves me right, there would be around 80 or more.
How do you vet them? How do you know, sir? I mean, ano ho ba ang qualifications para maging farmer beneficiary?
Well, based on the provisions of the law under Republic Act 6657 and 9700, there are some qualifications that would make a person qualified to be a beneficiary for agrarian reform. Like the age, which must be 15 years old and above.
50?
15,
15 and above, okay.
And that he must be actually tilling the soil, or he must be a tenant, and he's actually involved in agriculture in that particular land.
Yeah, but how do you do that if you're saying that some of the Atis have been driven away from the land that they were tilling? How do you know that they are supposed to be the beneficiary?
We have our employees who are actually based on that area. They have conducted investigation, actual verification. They have gathered information from all the people who were there, and they have made background investigation, etc., etc.
It's really an investigation process to find out if they would be beneficiaries. Let's bring in a soundbite here, sir, because to some people, siguro the question remains, paano mong gagawing agricultural land yan? Kaya pa ba? Meron bang lupa na kakayanin na pwede kang mag-till to grow crops in Boracay? Let's listen to Rowan Aguirre.
Boracay never has any significant farmlands. Meron ko konti, but I don't think it produces enough even to supply the island of Boracay. Wala na nagpa-farm dito. Kasi nga, mas madaling mag-cater sa tourism eh.
Why would, I guess the question is, number one, kaya pa ba? Pasensya na sa tanong, sir, hindi kasi ako farmer. Kaya pa ho bang mag-till? Fertile pa ba yung lupa doon? Siguro yun na muna, sir.
You know,
kahit na natuyuan na ng structures.
When you say farming, you are actually referring to agricultural activity, and this not necessarily mean that it is limited to rice or to palay. No, it's not. It's open to all kinds of plants that are high yielding, like mangoes or coconuts and cocoa and any other plants. So basically, for as long as it can yield products or goods that are actually beneficial to the people, that's farming, that's agriculture, and that land is actually suitable for different kinds of plants, not necessarily for palay.
Yes, sir, but even if structures were built there, sewer lines passed, ganon, fertile pa ho ba? Kaya pa ho bang to plant anything.
Pinky, that's the uniqueness of nature, you know.
So kaya.
That's how fertile the land is.
So I guess it also has a way to heal itself.
And with
in
all
a
the
way?
technology that we have today, can you imagine even Israel has converted the desert into a very profitable agricultural land?
Okay.
And why cannot we do it when in fact our land is so fertile?
So, Secretary, if you are able to give immediately 15.5 hectares to more or less 80 farmer beneficiaries, I wanted to ask you, can they, once they get it, pwede ba nila ito ibenta?
Of course not. There is a prohibition under the law that they cannot alienate, they cannot lease it, they cannot use it for purposes of gaining pecuniary benefits. They must have to till the soil.
Ganon.
That is the basic element of agrarian reform program, because that was designed basically in order to uplift the economic lives of the farmers. So if they would sell it, then they have violated the law.
But isn't that also uplifting the economic life of the
Of course,
farmers if they sell it?
That's just temporary. We all know that.
Yeah.
What is important is a long-lasting solution, as a matter of fact. That is the way it should be done, because that is the essence of the agrarian reform program.
Now, aside from the 15.5, sir, you're also looking at other hectares. Ano ho pa ba ang tinitingnan ng DAR na possible agricultural land?
In Boracay?
Yes.
In Boracay? Well, of course, as I said, because of the presence of these structures there, if ever there would be a real political will in order to restore it to its old glory, then basically, I think, but that's not our mandate, Pinky. I'm just trying to make an evaluation of the matter.
Yeah.
That if it would be removed, then it would definitely be converted into an agricultural land
Because,
again.
you know, sir, I asked you that because I read also that there is, apart from the 15.5, meron pang pinag-uusapan na 400 hectares. So yun siguro yung sinasabi yung
That's correct,
alienable
that's correct.
and disposable. But
That's
it's subject to probably a lot of questions, MRs, petitions because of possible clearances from the LGUs and all that. So again, here's the next question, sir. How can they build if they did not get the proper permits from the LGUs?
That's also my question. And basically, that is probably the reason why a lot of our other departments who have that mandate are saying that there are some officials who would be accountable and they would be held liable for all these so-called actions that they did.
Sec, did you hold any public consultations with the people in Boracay?
Regarding what?
Kayo po, about land reform, agricultural land, nagkaroon ho ba kayo ng pag-uusap? Kayo, yung DAR?
Well, when I went to Boracay, we have initially conducted this so-called consultation with particularly the ATIs.
The IPs.
And at the same time, I have created a task force that we really have to spend time here in order to see to it that it would be properly executed based on the orders of the President.
Now, recommendation of the President, is there a timeline, sir? Because we also want to quickly talk about the declaration of the President in Quezon yesterday. So pag-usapan na po natin.
Okay, please.
Go ahead, sir.
Well, of course, yesterday the President went to Mulanay, Quezon, wherein we were able to distribute around 639 hectares again to our farmer beneficiaries, of which there are around 389 cloas distributed. And the President, in his speech, made a pronouncement that we will go on with the phase 2 of the Agrarian Reform Program. And he made an emphasis on the fact that government-owned lands must be distributed, and he doesn't want to see these lands being idle. Military reservations, and even mountains if necessary, forest lands if necessary. So, in which case, we can probably immediately proceed for the distribution of the government-owned lands, which is covered by a law under Executive Order number 407. But with respect to the phase 2 of the Agrarian Reform Program, it needs some sort of legislation. So we will be making initiatives in order to request Congress to pass a law in order to come up with probably another program that would have to extend the Agrarian Reform Program. As we can see, the President has been making an emphasis on this, that he would really want to see to it that the welfare of our farmers would be uplifted, especially with their economic status. And he made such pronouncement even in Sultan Kudarat, wherein we distributed around, if my memory serves me right, around 4,000 hectares. And what he said there is that he even tasked Land Bank to extend loans to farmer beneficiaries and to enhance the support system that has to be given to our farmers.
So when we talk about phase 2, Secretary, that's phase 2 of the distribution of land. all over the Philippines. We're not just talking about Boracay.
In fact, I call it the renaissance of agrarian reform program.
How much land, how many hectares, thousands of hectares are you looking at, sir?
Well, at the moment, if we are going to talk about the area which has been covered by the notice of coverage, we still have around 500,000 hectares to distribute. And we are eyeing a target of at least 50,000 hectares per year. So
Hindi nyo matatapos yun, sir. Wala na kayo, sir.
During my term, But that's a good news for all our farmer beneficiaries. And secondly, if we will pursue the distribution of government-owned lands, then it would be more, much more. I'm looking at an area in Mindanao, which is the Arakan Valley. And these are thousands of hectares which need to be distributed. And at the same time, the Dapicol in Davao Penal Colony, and even in Palawan, these are big areas which, when utilized, would really enhance the lives of our farmers.
So we're looking at, to conclude this, sir, 500,000 hectares to be distributed at least.
Right.
Yeah. Is there a number, sir, on the beneficiaries? 500,000 to how many beneficiaries?
Well, it's a mathematical computation because the provision of the law states that the maximum area to be distributed is 3 hectares per farmer beneficiary. And I think that can be computed. Thank you.
Agrarian Reform Secretary John Castriciones. Sir, maraming salamat po sa inyo. I hope we can have you again when there is another pronouncement by the President and when you're ready to distribute.
Thank you very much, Pinky, and good morning to all your
Maraming
listeners and
salamat.
our viewers.
You're watching The Source on CNN Philippines. Coming up, feel the view with this window that translates the view into vibrations. That's for today's In Focus.